might not be what you think they are. Being open to the possibility that you may have a vulnerability you weren't aware of. Being open to all kinds of opportunities to learn more about what it is you're doing and how you might be able to do that better. And so that's kind of the underlying theme. Now, I've always been really interested in, I love technology and computers and stuff, but I'm also really interested in watching the way technology and society kind of shape each other's evolution. Because, all of the software that exists, all of you with your phones and laptops and web portals and all that kind of stuff, that was all written by people. And when people write software, they bake all of their own assumptions and biases and things into the way they write code, because we write code that reflects our own understanding of the problems in the world around us. But then within my lifetime, that technology has kind of turned around and went, actually, I'm going to start shaping the world around us. Because we have mobile devices and we have apps and we have Netflix and we have streaming media. And so, entire concepts like everyone in the office gathering around the water cooler to talk about last night's TV, that was a thing 15 years ago, because everyone was in offices and we all watched the same programs on the same television at the same time. That's gone. Technology has got rid of the TV, and now the pandemic plus technology has mostly got rid of the offices. And so these are the kind of changes, that are happening all around us. Now, my first experience of information security happened when I was around about probably 7 or 8 years old. And I had an Amstrad 6128 that looked like this when you switched it on. And I was writing a game, because I was convinced that I could write better games than came with the Amstrad. They were not very good games, but I was also a hubristic 8-year-old who thought I could do anything if I just figured out how. That bit kind of hasn't gone away. And I was going to write a game where you have to battle robots in space on your BMX. And so I got the basic manual and I learned it. And I wrote 10, print, welcome to BMX robots. And then I ran it. And it went, welcome to BMX robots. I was like, this is so cool. I'm a programmer now. And I saved BMX robots onto a disk. And I left it on the desk. And that night, my dad formatted all of the spare disks. And when I came back the next day, my BMX robots game was gone forever. And I got a little bit upset, because I was like, but that was my work. And so Dad said, all right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you your own disk. So you get your own disk here, and you can write your name on it, and you can store all your games on it and stuff. Now, I wasn't an idiot. I wasn't going to leave that disk on the desk with all of the other disks where it might fall into the wrong hands, right? I took the disk and I hid it in my bedroom in a drawer next to my Thundercat comics. I never finished BMX Robots. It's still somewhere on my to-do list. But that was my first experience of information security, and my InfoSec security proved absolutely rock solid because my disk never got erased again. The data on there was completely safe, hidden in a drawer in my bedroom next to a Thundercats comic. So that was my first InfoSec strategy. Now, why do we need security? Why does it even matter? Why do we worry about this kind of stuff? Well, there are 4 reasons why security is generally regarded by humans to be a good idea. 1, keep my stuff safe. If I do a piece of work and I save it, I want it to still be there tomorrow. I want to be able to go back to something, a year or 2 from now and know that it's there. I want to be able to retrieve my work and my source code and my, bank records and all these kinds of stuff. That matters. We want to be able to trust that if we've invested in something or it matters to us, we can trust it to technology and it'll still be there later. I don't want you to share my stuff. I want my stuff to be mine, and I don't want all of you getting access to it, but also, I don't want to see your stuff either. Like, you don't want to see what's in my inbox, and I really don't want to see what's in some of your inboxes. I don't even want the temptation. I want to know that the technology is not going to... Have you ever lived in one of those shared houses where all the mail just lands on the thing, and then like 8 different apartments all go through, and they pick... And I'm like, what a crazy system. How is that possibly a good way of sending things like credit cards and passports? And it kind of works, but I don't like that idea. I don't want to know about your stuff, and I certainly don't want my stuff shared with anyone else. 3, we want to be able to manage resources. Now, that Amstrad that we had in my house, it only had a certain amount of capacity available. There were 24 hours in a day, and it was a single-user system. And so we had to take turns. And my parents were like, you get an hour on the computer, and then you get an hour on the computer, and then no more computer time today, because you're going to have to go outside and play, otherwise you're never going to make it in life. And I'm like, haha, that one didn't really work. And then finally, we want to keep records. We want to know who did what. We want to understand if something changed on the system, who was on the system when the thing changed. What happened? Who had access to it? Now, the security model that I grew up with was a disconnected computer sat in a room in the house with a lock on the door. And it turns out that when you have a system like that, a system with all the storage is on disks and it's not connected to any networks, InfoSec is basically physical security. You want to keep your stuff safe? Lock the door. If you can't get in the room, you can't steal any of the information. If you don't want anyone else to get your stuff, lock the door. If they can't get in, your stuff is safe, they can't get it. You can't get anyone else's stuff because they will lock their doors as well. Controlling access to it, well, if you want to go on the computer, you've got to ask Dad to unlock the study, and then you can go in and have computer time. And keeping records, well, you know who's in the house, I'm assuming. If you get up in the morning and the computer has gone missing, then you're like, well, who was here last night? And hopefully most people can normally answer those kinds of questions. Now, that computing model is pretty much obsolete. A lot of people like me, that's how we got started. For the first 10, 15, maybe 20 years that I was writing code, the code wasn't connected to anything. The computer didn't have a network connection, and it sat on a table in the corner of a locked room, and that was just the model. But that wasn't the first computing model that we had, because actually shared computers are significantly older than single-user computers. Because back when computers looked like this, and they were really expensive, there was no way you could have one just for one person. You wanted one that was a shared resource. So, industry, corporations, universities. This thing here, does anyone recognize, anyone know what the operating system that is shown in this picture is? It's a thing called CTSS. It was one of the earliest multi-user operating systems. It ran on the IBM 7084 data processing system, which had lots of exciting tapes and came in lots of big cabinets. And it is notable in history because it was the first computer in history that had passwords. First computer ever where if you wanted to use it, you had to sign in by telling it who you were, and then you had to tell the computer a secret. Now, passwords are older than computers. There are passwords in the Bible. The word shibboleth actually comes from a passage in the Bible about using words to verify your identity. There are passwords in Shakespeare. But before computers, a password was something that I knew and you knew. And a secret is something that one person knows. So passwords were based on, well, I'm going to tell all my friends the secret word, and then anyone who knows the secret word must be my friend. And then someone finds out the secret word, and suddenly your army gets overrun, or your castle gets invaded, or whatever. But this was the first computer system that had passwords incorporated into it. And one of the people who had access to this was a guy called Alan Scher. And he was a postgraduate, and he was allowed 4 hours a week on the computer. And that was not enough for all the important research that he had to do. And so he became the first person in history to steal a computer password, because he had an idea. There was a file that stored all of the passwords, and of course you couldn't log in and look at the password file, because what would be the point in that? But if you didn't have access to a terminal, you could ask the CTSS to do you printing jobs. You could say, please, could you print these files tonight when everything's quiet? And then you could come in the next day and there'd be a big stack of printouts in the hopper, and you could go through and you could pull out your printout and your document. And so what Alan Scher did is he snuck in at about 11 o'clock on a Friday night, and he set up a punch card request to print the password file, and he fed it into the hopper and he went home. And he came back early the next morning, and there it was, all of the users with all of their passwords. You know what he did next? He photocopied it and gave it to all of his friends. And he said, here you go, if anyone doesn't have enough computer time, you can log in as all of these different people and you can do all this different kind of stuff. And that, is the first, certainly the first documented incident in history of someone's password getting pwned, is that correct pronunciation, Scott? Of someone getting pwned by a punch card on a CTSS running on an IBM 7084 terminal system. Now, there was this kind of hacker ethos back then that passwords were evil because everyone should have access to everything because people are lovely and we should just be able to trust them. And a lot of the early multi-user systems, they had no password at all. Everyone, you just had a directory with your name on it. It's like having no locks on your doors. You trust that people are going to do the right thing. A couple of them even, they got so fed up of like junior undergraduates trying to crash the system that they're just like, yeah, there's a crash command. If you want to crash the system, you type crash. That's it. Well done. Congratulations. Don't do it again. Because that was the kind of model. They just assumed trust and benevolence on everybody. And then when we started getting, ideas like, passwords and security and files that you didn't necessarily want other people to get access to, that created the scenario of, well, what are you doing if you access a file that isn't yours and you're not supposed to have access to? Because when that happens in the real world with physical objects, we have words for it. We talk about theft and stealing. Now, if you steal my car, I get up in the morning, I look outside, and I'm like, oh, my car is gone. I know immediately that something bad has happened. Now, if you steal my password, you kind of haven't really stolen it. Because in the United Kingdom, certainly, to be convicted of theft in a court, you have to prove that somebody intended to deprive you of something. It is legally impossible in the United Kingdom to steal a password unless you can prove that not only did you take it, but you intended that the person who had it in the first place couldn't use it anymore, and that's why you were doing it. You steal someone's car, they don't have the car. You steal someone's TV, they don't have a TV. You steal someone's password, they've still got a password. It still works. They may not even know that you've got it. And, this happens all of the time. We talk about it. Stealing is, like I said, perhaps not quite the right word, but maybe someone gets hold of your password and you don't know. You don't know for months. You don't know for years. And then one day, you go onto this website, which some of you may recognize, and you type in your email address, and it says, you have been pwned in 19 data breaches. And I'm like, all of those passwords got stolen. And of course I had no idea because they still worked the whole time. Now, this kind of thing, sometimes it is genuine. It's like malicious employees who are like, I hate this company. I'm going to take all the passwords and I'm going to put them on the dark web because I just want to cause them a lot of headaches and problems and lawsuits and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the time, this stuff just happens by mistake. What'll happen is one day somebody will set up Elasticsearch, and then somebody will be like, the password, the login system's a bit slow. Why don't we use Elasticsearch to speed up access to customer records? And Elasticsearch is running by default with no security, because it's fairly common now when you have, components, Elasticsearch, Redis, things like this, they assume that you are running them on a network where you have perimeter security, and so they don't have kind of username, password type credentials. And then somebody one day goes in and they're like, okay, I'm going to disable this firewall rule just to see if I can figure out why this system doesn't work. And then the phone rings or someone says, hey, you coming for lunch? They forget. They leave that open. And then a couple of weeks later, somebody comes along and they're like, oh, this is interesting. There's a port open here. I can get in here and I can sneak in there and I can have a look. Now, you have no idea. Nothing has broken. Your dashboard is still green. Your website is still up. Everything is fine. You have no idea that this series of small and relatively innocent-looking decisions has left all of your customer passwords out there on the internet in plain text for anyone to come along, until someone comes along and they go, oh, well, maybe I'll download a copy of this, just in case it's interesting. And I'll email a copy to Troy Hunt as well in case he thinks it's interesting. Now, let's be clear, just because someone has left the door open, you are still not allowed to go into their house and copy their stuff. This is completely illegal and you should not do it. And if you get caught and convicted, you will find yourself in a great deal of difficulty. But this kind of stuff happens. There are companies out there who are, like I said, there are malicious actors, there are negligent actors. If you find that your credentials are on a website that has got a vulnerability in it, there's often not a huge amount you can do. You can report it to them. Now, Scott, what generally happens when you go to a company and you say, I have found a security problem with your website? Like, out of 10, how many times do they threaten to sue you because they suck? 7. Yeah. So 70% of the time, if you say to someone, hey, there's a vulnerability, they will try and make out like this is your fault and you're a dirty criminal for having the audacity to point out that they've left the front door hanging off their house. Sometimes they will actually respond responsibly, and there will be a breach disclosure and they will close the thing. Sometimes it just goes on to a to-do list. There is one sysadmin who is this close from a nervous breakdown, and they've been there for 3 months, and the fact that Redis is listening on an open port on the internet just goes on the massive pile of things that this person knows are broken, and it will never get fixed in this lifetime or the next. And you're like, but you've got my password in there. So really, there's 3 things you can do. One is don't use the internet. Because it's a hive of scum and villainy, and it's full of criminals trying to steal things. I think we missed the window on that one a little bit. One is you have to use passwords that you can remember, and my memory's not that good. I sometimes have to look up my own address when I'm on the way home, or you use a password manager. Now, I have 497 different accounts in my password manager right now, because every single person on the world is like, please register. I want to go on an aeroplane. Please, email address and password. I want to buy a fridge. Give me an email address and password. And, all these sites. And, if you're using a password manager, great. Give me 64 characters of, what do you mean my password is too long? What do you mean I'm only allowed 8 characters on the password and it's not allowed to contain spaces? And now if any of you have a site out there, by the way, which is doing this, you should feel bad, because you shouldn't even know what the password is. You should hash it and throw it away. And we're going to see in a second why that's important. But people who don't use password managers and who can't remember 497 64-character random alphanumeric codes that they haven't used since they last flew with Icelandic Airways in 2017, they use the same password for everything because they think of a really secure one that no one's ever going to guess. And this can be bad. This is Aaron Barr. And Aaron used to be the CEO of a company called HB Gary Federal. HB Gary is a security company, and still is a security company. HB Gary Federal was a security company that was a kind of spin-off that they did so they could set up contracts doing security reviews for governments and federal services and those kinds of things. And in 2011, Aaron Barr thought that he had identified some of the people behind the anonymous I'm not quite sure. Everyone, like the newspapers always call them the anonymous hacker collective. I don't really like the pejorative use of the word hacker. So the anonymous, computer activists, cyber criminal, you know them. These people, the ones with the V for Vendetta masks and all that kind of stuff. And Aaron Barr thought he knew who was behind Anonymous, and he said he was going to publish this. It was going to be a big coup for his security company. We're going to reveal the identities of the people who are running Anonymous. Now, one of the golden rules about internet security is there's a kind of great quote that says, who are you actually worried about getting attacked by? And there's 3 scenarios. There's Russian botnets, there's your angry ex-partner, and there's Mossad. And Russian botnets, they are going to try for about 15 milliseconds to use the password they found on the Pirate Bay, and if it doesn't work, they're just going to move on to the next one. So if you pick a long password, that's going to be fine. Your angry ex-partner, they know your date of birth, they know your mother's maiden name, they know the street where you're at, they know all this kind of stuff. If you piss them off enough, you are going to have a big problem. And Mossad are already in all your systems, so just live your life and don't worry about it. But don't make it personal. Do not stick your head above the parapet and go, hey, Anonymous, check it out. I know where you live. This is what happened next. First of all, HB Gary Federal had a website that ran on a content management system. Now, there's lots of content management systems. There's Magento, and there's WordPress, and there's Drupal, and all these different Umbraco kind of systems. For whatever reason, they didn't use any of those content management systems. They hired a company to build one for them. And that company did not do a terribly good job on it. Now, most content management systems, you go on there and you say, mysite.com/gimme page 1. And it goes, hey, here's page 1. And you go, give me page 24. And it says, hey, page 24. And you go on there and you say, hey, give me page all of the users in your database. And any system built by a reputable developer who knows what they're doing will say, you can't do that. That's not allowed. The people who built HB Gary Federal's CMS, hey, give me page 1, select star from users, comma, minus, minus. And it went, oh yeah, here's page 1 with every single person in our website. So that was step 1. The attackers, the anonymous attackers, they now had access to the password file that was used on this content management system. Now, this is just one tiny little piece of the whole thing. What happened next is they took a look at this, and they're like, okay, we've got usernames, and we've got passwords, and those passwords are hashed. Now, hashing is you take a piece of text, and you turn it into a hash. And you take another piece of text, you turn that into a hash. So the piece of text is quite short. The hash is generally pretty long. The point is, you can't do this backwards. If you have the hash, it is almost impossible to turn that back into the original password. You can't do it. Now, take a look at this list of password hashes here. If you look at this very, very closely, you might notice that Bob and Eric's passwords, Bob and Gary's passwords here, the hash on those is the same. Now, again, if developers know what they are doing, this should never happen, because even if two users have the same exact password, you are going to generate a random number and stick it on the end of the password before you hash it, so that you will not, even if the passwords are the same, the hashes that come at the other side will be different. Do you think the people who built H.B. Gary Federal's content management system did this? No, they did not salt the passwords. So those passwords were hashed using, it was an MD5, which is a relatively kind of naive and not easy to reverse, but it's popular enough that there are attack techniques that you can direct at this thing. And one of them is, you go online and you're like, I would like, please, a file that contains every single up to about 10 characters that exists in the English alphabet with random combinations of numbers, along with all of their MD5 hashes, please. This is called a rainbow table. And what you can do is you can grab these. These go up to about 10, 12 gigabytes in size. So we're talking about a fairly chunky piece of data. But we're also talking about something you can fit in memory on a laptop that you can buy at the airport. You know, we're not talking about supercomputer type technology here. And so what the attackers did is they got hold of a rainbow table, they ran the H.B. Gary Federal CMS through that, and they went, oh look, this matches. Let's see if Gary's password here is, for the sake of this talk, monkey123. And it worked. And then they went, right, we know his email address and his password. Let's see if that works anywhere else. And that, my friends, is where the whole thing becomes spectacularly unstuck, because the CEO of the security company was using the same email and password for Twitter, Yahoo, Gmail, Facebook, World of Warcraft, World of Tanks, all these different things. And his account was a domain administrator on the corporate G Suite that ran the entire company. So by cracking the content management system written by the people who don't know what they were doing because they didn't hash any passwords, they got a password that was being reused that got them admin access to the entire company's email system. Now, at that point, this is pretty much game over. They effectively have, you'll know what root is. Root is like if you're on a Linux or a Unix system and you have root, it means you control everything. You can delete any file, you can upload, download, read, write, modify any file. You have total control of that system. At this point, the attackers have total control of H.B. Gary Federal, their content management system, the servers they run it, and the mailbox. And they're in there, and they're biding their time. This is the weekend before the Super Bowl happens. And they're like, we're going to get as much stuff as we can, and then when the Super Bowl starts, while that game is on, we are going to destroy this company. We are going to burn them to the ground. And they're looking around going, well, what else can we do? And they discovered that there was another site called rootkit.com, rootkit.org, sorry. And Rootkit was run by a guy called Greg Hogland. Now, Greg was and is a very respected security researcher. He's done a lot of work around, a rootkit is basically something you install on someone's computer if you want to take it over and compromise it and all kinds of things. And he ran this research site about, gathering information about these. Now, the only thing, as far as I can work out, that Greg Hogland did wrong is he had an email account on this system. Like, he didn't have any weak passwords or anything. It's just that he had an email account on the H.B. Gary Federal system that the attackers now had control of. So they went in, they did a bit of digging. This is one of his books, by the way, which is great. And so they go in, they do a bit of digging. They're like, okay, so we now have control of this email system. We can send email that looks like it came from these people. Let's talk about email for a second. Now, I have about that many emails in my inbox unread at any given point, and I've just learned to accept that because they come in faster than I can delete them. But we have all, most of us, got pretty good at looking at email and very, very quickly deciding, is this worth my attention or not? There's the email which is obviously legitimate because it's a reply in a conversation. It's entirely kind of keeping within character for what you're doing. Actually, I got an email from Jakob Bradford from NDC on Sunday night at 10 o'clock with a WebEx link for the workshops. And any of you who talked to me over the last year will know that I'm not a huge fan of running workshops over WebEx, and I'm very excited to be back doing things in person. So I get this email from him with a WebEx link. I assume it's a joke. Like, I know it's from him, but I don't believe that this thing is, this has got to be a wind-up. Turns out, no, it's actually real, and we had to set up because we had some people who couldn't make it here in person. But when you look at an email, like, okay, is this really from who I think it's from? Is it really about what it claims to be about? Is there really a prince in Nigeria who has 100 million US dollars that they need to get rid of, and for some reason I'm the only person that they can come up with? And, how do we decide? Say you get an email that looks like this, and it's, hello, I'm sorry for contacting you like this. I work for Amnesty International. We've learned your son is being held prisoner by armed militia in Denmark. We've made contact with their leader and arranged for him to be released if we can pay the ransom of 10,000 euros. Please contact us to arrange payment to ensure his safe release. Now, from the top, how far down this do you get before you realize that this is not real? Because I'm like, all right, great answer, I'm sorry for... Well, we got Amnesty International 1.ru, so if you're, but I'm like, I work for Amnesty International. Okay, we've learned that your son, now I don't have kids, so I'm like, at that point, this is not real. Some people do have kids. It's like, your son is being held prisoner by armed militia in Denmark. Does that happen in Denmark? Like, I don't think it does. We make contact with them, but let's change a couple of details. Let's say, so a couple of years back, my brother was, he spent a year in South Africa working on a bush lodge. He had no mobile phone reception. He's working out in the middle of nowhere. So let's say that they said, all right, we learned that your brother is being held prisoner by armed militia in Zimbabwe. And I'm like, all right, well, that's not entirely, I mean, it's unlikely, but it's not entirely impossible. And I look a bit closer, I'm like, well, Amnesty International 1, that still doesn't look legit. And I'm not going to gamble 10,000 euros on this. But say the person behind this had managed to get into Amnesty's email relay, and so it was actually from Amnesty International, and it looked like a legitimate email, and they only wanted $500. At that point, I'd probably be like, you know what? I'm going to send them $500 because I don't want to take the risk that this is genuine, and I ignored it. And this, my friends, is the art of social engineering. It is breaking into people's houses by persuading them to give you the keys. Anonymous are inside HB Gary Federal's email system, and they discover that they can send email to other people. They also discover that a guy called Jussi Yakohano, who's a security researcher, works for Nokia. He has root access to the box that hosts rootkit.org. So they send an email to Jussi that just says, hey, this is from Greg Hogland at HB Gary Federal. I'm in Europe, I need to SSH into the server. Can you open up the firewall and allow SSH through port 59022? In that mailbox, they also found an old root password. So they send this. Is our password still Jabberwocky, or did we change it to 88Screamer88? Thanks. Now, Jussi gets this email. It looks legit. It's from an address he recognizes, from a person he knows. He's like, hey, do you have public IP, or should I just drop the firewall? And it's Wocky, but root remote access is not allowed. No, I don't have public IP with me. I'm ready for a small meeting, and I'm in a rush. Just reset my password to change me 123, give me public IP, and I'll SSH in and reset my password. Okay, it should now accept from anywhere to 47152. I'm testing it. Your password is change me. I'm online. Hey, in Europe, but you're not in Finland? Reply comes back, no. I'll squeeze out some time. Maybe we can catch up. I'm in Germany for a bit. Are you sure the IP is still this? Does it work now? Yes. Did you reset the user Greg? No. Your account is named Hogland. Okay, thanks. I'll email you in a few. Boom! Game over. Somebody out there has just been persuaded to help out their friend who is in a rush getting ready for a meeting, and in so doing, they have given away the username, the password, they've opened it up, they've dropped the firewall, and they have allowed this complete stranger to SSH in because they have no idea it's a complete stranger. Now, the people behind this attack, they were caught, and most of them ended up going to jail. And the irony is that all of this stuff about, identity and trust and breaking things, mostly they were caught because one of them flipped and started informing the FBI about who all the rest of them were. So this whole thing based on exploiting other people's naivety and trust in social engineering, actually the thing that screwed most of them is that they trusted somebody who turned out to be working with the feds the whole time. But they wiped out HB Gary Federal. By the time the Super Bowl Monday, when they kicked off that game, they're like, right, delete that. Take all the email, back up the whole thing, and put an archive of their entire email system on the Pirate Bay so that anyone who wants to can download it. And then we are just going to delete every single piece of data from all their systems. Rootkit.org just went. It vanished that night, and it never, ever came back. It's been offline ever since. Now, like I said, the people behind it, they were caught, they were arrested, they did time. But if you look at the escalation of that, every step, there is when you think about computer security and attacks, a lot of the time the mainstream media portrays it as these kind of, the genius hacker in the hoodie and stuff, but it's not. Every step of this attack was just as sophisticated as it needed to be to get to the next step. SQL injection, that's not difficult. You can get tools that will do this. Weak hashing, well, that's the next step. All right, we got passwords. Rainbow tables, we'll decrypt those. Now we have plain text passwords. They're being reused on a bunch of other stuff, social engineering, and boom. End of story. Whole system is now over and been completely wiped out. Now, to me, these kind of attacks, they fall into three different categories. First of all, there's what I call the technical exploits. This is the attacker versus the system. There's no other people involved. It's just them looking for vulnerabilities, buffer overflows, buffer underruns, open ports, things been left open. Even the kind of, smash your way in through a window in the middle of the night and find a network port and leave something on there that's going to give you access to the building from outside. But there's no kind of other people involved. The second category is the things people do when they think nobody is watching. This is the people who, you should use different passwords. You're the CEO of a security company, but your passwords are secret. So how's anyone ever going to know if you use the same one on all these different systems? And, this is the kind of, you really, really shouldn't install games on your work laptop, but they're not going to find out. I'll get rid of it before I go back into the office on Monday. It's these kind of behavior. It's the things that people do that they know they're wrong, but they think they're not going to get caught. And besides, it's probably not that big a deal. And, one of the great headaches in security is giving someone a laptop or access to a computer system that does not give them the access they need to be able to do their job. I used to work in media. I spent a long time working for a company who ran a set of video studios in Soho in London. And we had video hardware in there that would only work if you had admin access to the workstation it was installed on. And so, we had freelance camera operators coming in, and it's like, oh yeah, well, we actually need to give you admin access to this computer just so you can do the job we hired you to do. If you say to somebody, we need you to edit this report, and you're like, but I only have the report as a PDF, and you're like, well, I don't have a PDF editor. That person is going to find a website where they can turn a PDF into a Word document so that they can edit it. Because nobody in history, the boss has said, have you got that press release ready? And they said, oh no, boss, it was not possible to do it in compliance with our corporate security policy, so I didn't do it. Because that doesn't happen in real life, because bosses do not do stuff like that in real life. And then the third category of vulnerabilities is the social engineering. It's engineering relationships of trust between individuals in a way that causes somebody to give away something that they shouldn't have done. Now you think about that, the H.B. Gary attack there. What do you think Yussi is thinking? He sat there at his laptop and, he's not paranoid about this. He's thinking, hey, my friend Greg is in trouble. I got a chance here to be the hero. And, that is a powerful tendency. Most people, or certainly many people, they want to help. They want to help someone out. We all know what it's like to be stuck in a tight spot and no one is helping you. You can't get into the system, or you need to get that file that you forgot to take with you. We can relate to that situation. And so we know what it feels like. And so when we think someone else is there, our instinct is, well, we can help them out here. And that is how we're going to steal a bunch of money. So this is Initech, and this is the CTO of Initech. This is Alice, and this is Bob, and Bob works in finance. And we are going to wait. We have got access to their email server because we found the passwords for somebody, and we escalated. Now, no one knows this yet. We've been in there for a couple of weeks, just kind of waiting and watching how things unfold. They don't know we're in there. We are going to wait. We are going to wait until about 5:30 on a Friday afternoon, because we know that every Friday Alice goes to her Zumba class, and she puts her phone in a locker, and for a couple of hours she'll be doing Zumba with her friends, and then they'll go out to a bar afterwards. But for that couple of hours, she is unreachable. She's not going to be checking her phone. And at that point, we send this email to Bob, and we say, hey, it's from Alice. Bob, I need a favor. MetaCortex have agreed to 25% off hosting for the next year, but only if we get it signed off today. Everyone else has already left, and their payment system doesn't work with Amex, so I can't use my card. Can you wire $8,550 to this account ASAP so we can get it signed off? Now, you're Bob. First thing you probably do is you pick up the phone, can't get hold of Alice, phone's off. Maybe she's at Zumba, maybe she's on an airplane, maybe she's just switched her phone off, she's unreachable, she's in meetings. But we know she's unreachable, so we know Bob can't verify this. Now maybe Bob is like, well, this is a corporate email from the CTO, I'd probably better do what they asked me to do. Maybe Bob says, hey, is this legit? And gets back, I'm at the airport and can't get any phone reception, just make the transfer. They said if they don't get cleared funds by 7 p.m., the deal's off, it's already 6:35. What do? Are you going to be the one who goes, nah, screw the deal? I only work in finance. I don't trust the CTO. They're probably lying. I don't care how hard they worked on this. Or do you transfer $8,500 to this account because you've got it in writing from the CTO with confirmation following up? so you do it. This is real. This is called a Friday afternoon attack, Friday afternoon fraud, and it is absolutely endemic. It'll be one person who's left in the office, and somebody has got access to either, like, they've spoofed cloned a mobile phone, or they've got access to the email. They've got some way of getting hold of this person and making it look like they are the CTO or the CEO or someone like that. It's Friday afternoon because no one's going to notice for the entire weekend. And probably no one's going to notice until a couple of weeks later when they realize that this transaction went through at 6:30 on a Friday night. Bob's the only person left in the office. Or, Bob's the only person who's still working. Everyone else has already left. By the time they figure it out, the money has bounced through half a dozen accounts. It's completely gone. You have no idea where it went. That money is definitely not going to be coming back anytime soon. And, it all boils down to, how do we make a decision about who should we trust? When we interact with other people, people we know, people we just met, people we're talking to on email or on Zoom, we bring a whole bunch of our own kind of social, cultural prejudices and assumptions and things into play with it, You meet someone for the first time, you make a snap judgment. Who is this person? Are they legit? Are they a threat to me? Is this someone I could be friends with, do business with, have a relationship with? This person, would you trust them? What about this guy? What about them, And all of these things come into play. How many of these people would you immediately assume are trustworthy? And what does that say about you? And what does that say about them? And what does it say about the way the relationship between people who look like these people and people who look like the rest of us is portrayed in media and in the societies that we grow up in and stuff? And one of the big challenges that we are having again and again now is that it's not even enough to decide whether a human being is trustworthy or not. It's proving a problem deciding whether a human being is a human being or not. Now, when you try and sign up for anything online, you will almost invariably have to prove that you're a real person, because it is so easy for things that are not real people to just go and register a couple of 100,000 accounts overnight and then use them to do nefarious and mischievous things. Now, I have no idea how to tell whether someone clicking links on my website is a real person or not. And so what we tend to do is we outsource it. We say, well, if we can get to solve a CAPTCHA, then, and very few people run their own CAPTCHA. So we'll put a Google CAPTCHA on the page. And so they'll do that. Now, when you do that, you're also training, Google engines to drive around and find traffic lights. So that's kind of an interesting way of donating your intelligence and intellect to a company with $100 bajillion. Or maybe we're like, well, if they got a mobile phone, they must be a real person, because bots don't have phones. Or if they got a credit card. And all we're doing is we're kind of, pushing the things back. We're like, well, we can't be bothered to check. But presumably, if they have a credit card, the bank checked. And so we're going to say, well, if it's good enough for the bank, it's good enough for you. And if they got a mobile phone, presumably the phone company checked. And if it's good enough for the phone company, it's good enough for us. And if neither of those, then maybe Google checked. And if it's good enough for Google, and if you don't have any of these things, then you're basically stuck, because you are not allowed to cooperate and play online. Now, this is not, you probably have a picture in your head right now, somebody with bees in their beard living in a cave in Wisconsin with a load of canned food. That's not the only scenario we're talking about. There was an article in NBC earlier this year about a company in Chicago who they rehabilitate prisoners who have just been released. Now, I want you to imagine you've been in jail since 1983. You have never seen a mobile phone. You have never seen an internet connection. You have no idea what a web browser is, and you're free. You've paid your debt to society. You come out, and they assign you a caseworker who's like, all right, I'm going to help you out. And you're like, well, how do I get an apartment? And they're like, oh, you can find them online. They're like, online? What line? No, this is real. This actually happened. People are going, what is all this stuff? And they cannot take part in anything. How do you get an email address if you can't prove that you've got a phone number or something to use to verify it? It's this almost impossible bootstrapping process. Now, one initiative that I heard about, I gave this talk, like I said a little while ago, and someone said afterwards, do you know that there's now this thing where if you go to the library in some countries, they'll give you an email address, and like the fact that the librarian has met you and had a conversation with you is considered sufficient validation. I think that's beautiful. That's exactly the kind of thing we should have in every single neighborhood, is a place where you can go and go, I don't have a credit card, I don't have a mobile phone, but look, I'm a real person. See, do the internet stuff. And they're like, all right, we'll help you get that set up. I think that's absolutely brilliant. But, for so many of us, it boils down to, are you a robot? No, I'm not a robot. Click. I'm not a robot. Click. I'm not a robot. Click. And the problem is that accounts are worth money. Do any of you use a thing called GitKraken? Which is like a visual, I love GitKraken. It's fantastic. And when they launched GitKraken in 2016, they had a competition. and they had like a cartoon, like an animation competition. They had a songwriting competition. And what they said to everyone is, the person who gets the most social media engagement will win $5,000 cash. And so you go online and you're like, how many Twitter likes can I get for $5,000? Actually, that's a lot. By the time they shut down their competition, the top 3 entries were all people who had about 15,000 likes on Twitter, all of which were little eggs with an account like Bob1234567889. Because, you know, if someone's saying we'll give you $5,000 for the most Twitter likes, and you can buy 250 likes for $7.99, this is real. This is Insta followers. I took this screenshot a couple of weeks ago. You know, you can go on and you can just go, yeah, give me 500 likes. I don't care. You know, I'm just out here trying to win money. And if it's a pure, the person with the most likes get the most money, then this just becomes a really simple business transaction. But then you get into talking about the idea of social media engagement and promotion and getting people to pay attention to news stories. Anyone heard of the Denver Guardian? The Denver Guardian does not exist. The Denver Guardian was a fake website set up pretending to be the website of a newspaper that never existed, which spread this story about an FBI agent who never existed, suspected in the Hillary Clinton email leaks. This was shared on social media something like 500,000 times, mostly by accounts that didn't exist in the first place, but then those got picked up and they got retweeted, and this ended up getting millions and millions of page impressions, being seen by over 15 million people online. And this idea, you know, using the idea of false identity to create engagement, to manipulate people's perception of what's going on in the media, this is becoming a really, really big problem. Now, when I was a kid, you know, playing around on my Amstrad, the media, the news, came from newspapers and TV. And the newspapers and the TV, they were run by companies, and if they said something that wasn't true, you could sue them, and they could go to jail, because that was an editorial position. You could say, you said something that wasn't true, they could be taken to court. There was a very, very kind of strict controls and liability around libel, slander, publishing, copyright, all these kinds of things. That kind of doesn't really exist anymore. Now, there was a little point in the 90s, early 2000s, where it seriously looked like internet providers might be subject to the same rules as that. Like, you know, imagine you said something on Facebook about me that I didn't like. I could sue Facebook. I could be like, you published something, it says here that Scott Helm said this nasty thing about me. Mark Zuckerberg, I'm suing you for $100 billion. And, you know, I'd lose, but they'd still have to answer the case. And, you know, this kind of went backwards and forwards for a little while. Now, it's kind of nice to think that you might have been able to sue Mark Zuckerberg because you didn't like something on Facebook. But, you know, imagine you could sue GitHub because you didn't like something, a comment that someone wrote in a code base. Any kind of social media would be impossible if internet providers and websites were liable for user-generated content. And so the pendulum swung the other way. And they are carriers. You cannot sue a website because one of their users posted something nasty any more than you can sue the Postal Service because someone sent you a nasty letter. It just, that legal precedent was never established, and that's probably a good thing. But, you know, when it comes to interacting with somebody or something online and trying to decide if they're legitimate, to me, it boils down to 3 questions. You know, how confident am I that this is really this person? Do I trust them? And what happens if I'm wrong? Now, the first 2 of those questions we can plot as a set of axes like this. Is this really them, and do we trust this person? And our top left quadrant here is me having a Zoom conversation with my mum. Now, yes, I trust my mum. She did once lie to me about the dog going to live on a farm, but apart from that, I think she's a pretty trustworthy individual. And I know it's really her because I can see her and I can hear her, and, you know, there are all sorts of cues in that real-time face-to-face video interaction that make me believe that this is legitimate. The bottom quadrant, do we trust? This is Angela. Angela was one of my school friends who, you know, you never see for 15 years, and then they pop up as a friend request on Facebook one day. And this is Angela's profile with the whole friends don't let friends drink Prosecco, and she posts pictures of things her kids have done at school. And, you know, I go on Facebook one day, and I get a, hey, notifications. Angela tagged me and 29 others in a post. That's interesting. I wonder what the post is. Oh, look. Angela's given up homeopathy and gone into the cheap Ray-Ban sunglasses business, clearly. Do you think this is really Angela? No. I know who she is, and, you know, I trust her insofar as you have to trust people to be on Facebook with them, but I'm pretty confident that this is not Angela posting this content right now, because this is a really common scam to get people to buy, I don't know, cheap sunglasses. Has anyone ever bought sunglasses from one of these? Like, somewhere someone must have bought some, otherwise they'd have stopped doing it, and they're still doing it. So someone somewhere is buying all the cheap Ray-Ban sunglasses from Facebook. Top right corner, is it really them? Do we trust them? The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is it really them? Yes, they have a blue tick. Do I trust them? No, not in a million years. They've been fired from 3 jobs for lying, if nothing else. And so I know that this is this person. I trust that everything on that feed is genuinely being put there by, well, face it, somebody from the Prime Minister's press office. But that does not mean I am going to believe any of it for 1 fraction of 1 second. And then the bottom right, this is Helen. Helen's a widow with a daughter, and hey, handsome, Helen's looking for a special man. Is it really her? I don't care. Do I trust her? I don't care, you know, at this point. And what if I'm wrong? I don't care. And so that's the third question, you know, what if you're wrong about it? If Angela really is selling cheap Ray-Ban sunglasses, I might miss out on cheap Ray-Ban sunglasses. If the Prime Minister is telling the truth, then, well, I don't know. That's just without precedent. But if the person I'm talking to on Zoom claiming to be my mum isn't actually my mum, that could get me into, you know, all kinds of difficulty. And so those are the 3 questions. Do I trust them? Is it definitely them? What are the consequences if I am wrong? Now, it is becoming, we've looked at how you can fake someone's identity by taking over their email account, how you can take over someone's phone number, all these different ways of interacting with somebody, Facebook, social media. What about video? You know, there was this famous case a couple of months ago where somebody joined an online court hearing, and for whatever reason, they were a cat. Probably because they'd signed the corporate contract that said you will not allow any unauthorized person to have access, and then they'd let their kids play on the laptop. Because as everyone knows, when you sign a corporate information security policy for the District Court of the United States, your kids are exempt from the unauthorized persons thing because it's just too much effort to fight your kids. And so they go on there, and you know, this lawyer is like, can we do this? I'm actually here, I promise you I'm not a cat. And it's like, well, that's exactly what a cat would say if they were trying to infiltrate the court system, right? But video plugins are getting freakishly good. I have a thing called Snap Camera that I was using when we were doing kind of Zoom parties and social stuff. And I was playing around with Snap Camera one night, and some friends joined the call, and they didn't know it was a plugin. They thought I had dyed my hair purple, because it works in real time, and it's that convincing. Now, there is one kind of really interesting edge case in all this. NVIDIA at the moment, they are working on a system called, what's the name of this thing? It's Maxine. And Maxine is a brilliant idea. The idea is, you know, most video conferencing technology is based on the idea that you take a video of someone's face, so you got a grid of pixels, and then you compress that as much as you can, but you're still compressing video. You squeeze it down the wire, and at the other end you decompress it, and you hope that works. What NVIDIA are doing is they're like, well, we can do real-time video capture, and we can do real-time kind of, you know, kinetic or cinematic rendering on the other end. And so the way that Maxine works is it looks at how you're moving your face, and it turns that motion capture data into, and we're talking tiny, you know, we're talking kilobits of data. You can run full high-definition video conferencing over dial-up internet with this thing. Because on one end, we have a video processor that is literally like, how far did you move your mouth? Did you raise your eyes? Did you do that with your eyebrows? Did you move that? Turns that into telemetry, sends it over the wire, and on the other end, it has a 3D simulation of your face that replicates those movements exactly. And it can do stuff like tilt the face a little bit, so it looks like you're making eye contact instead of looking up at the webcam, which I think is brilliant. But then you think, you know, what happens if you manage to hack into someone's rig and you steal a copy of their Maxine avatar? And now you can have a 3D replica face on the other end. You know, you're like, well, I decided that I want to be Brad Pitt on this call, so I'm going to steal some telemetry data from that, or I'm going to set up a head. Now, the interesting thing about this is something I've been doing a whole sort of bunch of work and research around. Faking video, it turns out, is kind of easy, and within a year it's going to be trivial. Faking voices is almost impossible, because you cannot do it in real time. Because until somebody has finished saying the sentence they are saying, you don't have enough information to know how somebody else would have said it. And so the only way that this is going to work is if the fraudsters can also do voice impressions. So that's what we're going to look at for anybody who's investing in computer learning hardware and they're going to acting classes to do a whole bunch of different accents. That person is probably going to try and steal all of your NFTs next year, so keep a very, very close eye on them. But You know, the fundamental problem with all this kind of stuff, you know, trust and security and identity, is that it all turns computers into things that are just a pain in the ass, and they are not fun, and they don't do anything useful. Because what we want to do is we want to, you know, unlock it with a fingerprint, connect it to the Wi-Fi, share the stuff we've got, and yay, we can all connect, and we can have video calls, and we can have happy lives. And it is kind of frightening looking at the number of ways that all this stuff can go wrong. And it is important for all of us, you know, who work in this industry to be aware of these kinds of things, to be aware, you know, both as individuals and citizens, but also as developers and administrators and product owners. What are the vulnerabilities? How do these things go wrong? What are the exploitation angles we're looking at? Now, coming along to an event like this and giving up, you know, your own time in the evening to listen to people like me talking about this kind of stuff, that is a really good start. You are all awesome and you rock because you are here, and that is cool, and thank you very much, everyone, for coming. But I want to leave you with a quote from a guy who, he did one of the keynotes at NDC the first time I was here in 2015 in Oslo. It's James Mickens. We tried to get him back, but he's now an emeritus professor of computer science at the University of Harvard, and is therefore a little bit busy to come over to Norway and do conferences like this. But, you know, he had this fantastic paper. He's talking about the state of the art in info security a few years ago, and he said, you know, I will not live my life in fear because someone named Freakus Maximus at DEF CON 2014 showed that you can induce peanut allergies at a distance using an SMS message and a lock of your victim's hair. If that's how it is, I accept it and I move on. Thinking about security is like thinking about where to ride your motorcycle. The safe places are not fun, and the fun places are not safe. I will ride wherever my spirit takes me. Thank you. All right, how are we for time? Do we have I think we probably have time for one question, so make it a good one. Or we have no questions because we've achieved complete enlightenment. This is brilliant. All right, well, I'm sticking around all week. I'll be at NDC for the whole of the next 3 days. I'll be coming along to Geek Beers later, so if anyone does want to chat about any of that stuff, please come and find me. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm going to get out of the way and hand you over to a panel of people who actually know stuff about security as opposed to just Googling and telling stories about what they found. So thank you very much.
All right. So just a quick info first for those of you who don't know what OWASP is. You can find some information about us online. We are a global non-profit organization, and here in Norway we mainly do meetups. Today we're doing a panel together with NDC, and we've been lucky to get to borrow some of the speakers, which is great. So we'll do a bit of questions. You can also ask your own questions, but we'll start with some that we created up front, and then we'll get to that. But first, we'll do a quick introduction of the panel. So we'll start with Patricia. Just who are you, and why do you work on security stuff?
Okay, so my name is Patricia Ols. I work at TurtleSec. I'm a C++ programmer, work on native application security, and I do some trainings in that area and help clients. Yeah.
Next, please.
Me? Okay. I'm Scott. I'm a security researcher. Founded a couple of security companies. Just finished 2 days of workshops. I do security training and speaker as well.
All right, so I'm Marit Tokle. I work at Soplastera as a consultant, so I work a little bit with the clients, preaching security there, trying to make them write more secure code, but I also work a little bit internally to try to make us write more secure systems at the clients. Yeah.
All right, my name is Christian. I currently work on Google's threat analysis group. And so I do threat intel stuff. Previously, I've done vulnerability research, reverse engineering, malware analysis, and so on.
Excellent. What we'll do now is we'll ask some questions, and if you want to answer, you can. You can also pass if you don't want to answer them. So the first question is, what do you consider the biggest concern for security at the moment?
See, this is why I tried not to be at the end.
You have to set the tone.
Yes. Oh, okay. So what is? Wow, that's a very big question. I'll leave that to you.
So it's such a big field. Like, that's probably the hardship in answering, right? Like, I think for me, I specialize in crypto and app security. So in that space, just I find so often that we have amazing security features and things that you can do very easily, but often people don't know about them. I just spent 2 days doing workshops, and it's like, hey, who's ever heard of this thing? And it's like tumbleweed, right? And it's really easy to turn on, and it's really easy to do. And the security industry builds things to help with security, and then we have developers, and then there's like no conduit in the middle for the security people to talk to the developers, which is why I do a lot of training on public speaking, because often, we berate users or developers as security people, like it's a common thing, and I'm like, often people just don't know the security button is there, right? It's not that people don't want to do security, they just don't know like how or where or why. So I think we need to share information better. We need to get the information and knowledge out there.
I want to add on that, actually, because usually what I say is the biggest issue in secure development is that we don't have enough people knowing security. So we have a huge lack in security knowledge.
You pass, okay. And then as a follow-up question, which got kind of answered already, but I'll leave it for the rest of you as well. Why is a lot of software still so insecure?
Stack Overflow.
Sorry, go on.
I also think that we underestimate how complex things are and how interconnected things are, and it's practically impossible to have a complete view of even the software project that you are currently in. You probably only know a fraction of it, so the complexity of it all, I think, will make it hard to at any point be confident that it is secure for some value of secure.
And I think, again, to follow nothing is secure, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think people kind of chase this idea that we can have a secure application or write some secure code, and we never can. We can only build something that's secure enough, right? Like, we have to recognize that security is not an absolute state that we can achieve. We just need to get to a point where it's good enough to do the thing that we need without completely failing us or being hacked or leaking all of our data on an open port, like Dylan said. So it's not an absolute state, it's just a good enough state. And I think most people think it's impossible because they think like absolute security is this achievable thing, and it's not.
Anything to add? No. Right. What's one recommendation you would give to a development team?
Oh, can I start?
Mm.
I've been working on this thing, which probably most of you are like, oh, God, is she really going to say this? But I've been working on something I call, or in my project we have another name for it, but it's Mozilla's framework called Rapid Risk Assessment, which I used to call fun way to do risk analysis and threat analysis. So that's something I want to try to make more developers look at, try to make some easy way to think more about security to make it an early part of the development process. Like, think about before you start developing, right? Yeah, so that's my tip to you guys. Take a look at that. There's a hand. Should we answer that, or?
Sure. Bit louder, sorry.
All right, so if I'm going to repeat that. So this person said that when his team is filling out the risk analysis, they have like this huge Excel form. I would like to add boring as well. Can I? Yeah. And that's exactly what we try to eliminate in this rapid risk assessment. It's supposed to be short. You're supposed to focus on what data is flowing in the system, not focus on how what's the English word again? What's the consequence and how likely is it to happen? But what we're focusing on is what is important for this system, for us as developers to make it more secure. So it's more like a developer way of thinking of risk analysis. But then again, often if there are projects where you have risk managers, that would be just input to their large and boring risk analysis, right? But it's a way to make the developers think more about what we can do in the fun way, not the boring way.
Yeah, I think something along the same lines there with rapid risk assessment is just, what's the term called, like shifting left on security, to make it like a part of the, I don't know, early stages of development is probably a good idea. Like if you try to sprinkle security on top in like, 10 days before release, you're probably going to have a bad time. So yeah, at least, I mean, even like on my team, we see like sophisticated attacks against very mature and, very big projects that have, yeah, even that have a lot of like thought into security, and even they get like breached sometimes. So I think it's worth to, put some focus on that early on.
And eliminate the low-hanging fruits, right?
Yeah.
So just how much security expertise can we reasonably expect the average software developer to have? And is there a discrepancy between expectation and reality here?
I think that as security professionals, as a security professional, like we're passionate about security and we think that everyone should care about security as much as we do. And in reality, like no one cares about the thing that you care about as much as you do, right? And I think that we sometimes lack that realization and think that everyone should care about security as much as we do. One of the examples that I gave in my workshop yesterday was like health and safety in the workplace, which is a really big annoying thing in England and I'm sure everywhere else, and they come in and they do their assessments, and like I'm not a health and safety expert, but I know how to conduct myself in a reasonably safe way and not do bad things that hurt myself or other people. And I think we just need to get to that same level with security, where we have that really small amount of knowledge that actually fixes like 90% of the problem. So I don't think and don't want other people to become security experts necessarily. Like we just have to identify that there's a really small part of this that should be enough, right? Like we know enough to do things in a safe way and not hurt ourselves later.
I also want to comment on that.
Okay.
At university, we had a professor who said that, I always fail at saying this, but he said something like, you wouldn't educate a building engineer, do you say that?
Mm-hmm.
Without giving them knowledge about the fire safety, right?
Yeah.
And he used that as an analogy, yeah, thank you, into security. Like, do we really want to educate a lot of engineers or developers without giving them at least a base knowledge of security?
And that's the point, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's small,
yeah.
we don't need or want people. And this is another thing that I think security pros, like I do, we do as security people, is we expect everyone to care about it as much as we do and to know. And in reality, I hope that we don't, because we're never going to make everyone a security professional. That's like a futile effort.
So one thing that I tend to focus on in my trainings is that vulnerabilities are also bugs, right? And a lot of the tools that you can use to find vulnerabilities, you can also use to find like what you would normally consider just bugs that might not be reachable from the outside, might not be exploitable by anybody, but it are still bugs and are quality issues. And so if we can use like tools to find vulnerabilities as tools to just find bugs, then they integrate really well into the development process. And a lot of things can be found that way. Some things are you know, just good practice and how you do things. But I also think that we are in a field that we have to learn continuously, right? So if somebody taught you about some security stuff like 10 years ago, that's not going to be necessarily what you're going to need today, right? So I don't think it's enough to just say, you know, we should have some security stuff at university. We have to kind of realize that we're in an interconnected world like we are. We are all creating software that is somehow online or at least reachable. And that we have to have at least some awareness and continuously educate ourselves. But that doesn't, you know, everybody can't be an expert in everything, right? So, yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, one thing that I think about in like with this question is if we provide, you know, the normal developers with good tooling, good libraries, they probably like, if we never made string copyright as a function, we would probably, you know, there would probably be, you know, half the amount of buffer overflows or something like that. Just, you know, providing developers with good APIs, good libraries, that makes it maybe not impossible, but at least harder to, you know, shoot yourself in the foot. That's, yeah, something that at least I think is important.
So I'm gonna take one question from the audience that I accidentally clicked publish on, but it was a good question. So what's the biggest failure you did in regards to security? Why did you do it, and what did you learn from it? Is someone brave enough to answer this?
Which one to talk about? I mean, like, I'm a human being. Like, I've got halfway through a spam email and click the link and you know, I'm like drinking my coffee and walking out to the car and I'm like, oh shit, hang on, like, you know, this is bad. But you know, like, I found like passwords from accounts that have been dumped and sent to me, thanks to Troy, from services that I had many years ago and have forgotten about, and they're just like the most terrible passwords. Before I became a security person and used a password manager, and you know, some like derelict account. Like, I do things all the time, you know, nothing, touch wood, like nothing that I know about is bad yet, because like, of course I could have been totally hacked, like Dylan said, and I just don't know about it yet. Mossad is in all of my stuff, but you know, like, things happen, and I think we have like a very transparent approach at one of my companies. We publish our penetration test reports and issues that we have. I think it's more important that we're transparent and fast in resolving things than not having the things happen.
I'm trying to think like that. Like, I actually did something like really terribly wrong. I did have a minister of Norway say that I was a threat to national security once. So
That's a win column.
I have to say that was special. Afterwards, the Norwegian Politiets Sikkerhetstjeneste, so I don't even know what that would be in English. I went out and said that I was not, so that was also nice. And then the National Security Agency invited me to hold a talk for them, so I think I'm good. So, but yeah, no, I've mostly been fixing security vulnerabilities, not so much making them, though I'm, not that I know of at least.
Yeah, I guess for me it's like when analyzing malware, I've been, copy pasting URLs and IPs and maybe not being too careful. So I think I've
Oops, I'm not in the sandbox.
So yeah, that's happened a few times.
Yeah, I think for me it's clicking a link.
Yeah.
Yeah, phishing.
But what else
Yeah.
do you do with the link, right? Like everyone's like, you
but
shouldn't click the
actually,
links, and I'm like, oh, these
That was
multifunctional
just like
things.
the company October security thingy, so it wasn't that bad. But I was a little embarrassed in a way.
I'll actually answer this one myself as well. Because the first website I built when I went to university was a PHP website. And in PHP you had a lot of wonderful features, and one of them was what's called the remote file include. And I was using this feature as a part of the website, not dragging things in remotely, but like, okay, now I'm gonna display the frame and I'm gonna have like this page inside here. So I'm gonna like show the about page. And that was a part of the URI, but you could just enter a URL there and we'll actually bring it in and render it as PHP. So basically remote code execution. So that was a bit embarrassing, but that was before I even knew anything about security. So yeah, things happen to all of us, I guess. Here's a web hacking question. Marquee or alert or prompt?
Ooh. Marquee. Like, it's gotta be, right? It's like the OG. It's like
Yeah, I've never heard about any of them except alert, so I guess alert.
marquee tags are the original.
Yes.
Like just
Scroll.
yeah.
Yes,
Oh yeah.
yes, yes.
Nice.
You get your profile name and wrap it in a
You
marquee
can feel
tag and
young
then
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely do.
Oh no, this is something I heard from a friend. I definitely haven't ever seen a marquee tag.
Let me tell you about the blink tag.
The blink.
Old school GIFs, like when the GIFs were actually GIFs. Yeah, there was a whole generation of internet that was a joy to behold. Oh no!
How does that work?
Oh no!
Feel like a faster scroll?
Oh no!
Oh wow.
It's going to add a whole new level to my workshop.
The web will be a terrible place tomorrow. All right. Next question. How do we fix the supply chain? Oh, this is a difficult one.
Wow. I mean, if I could answer that, we'd be having a Zoom call from my yacht, right? Like, I think that for me, like the supply chain means the JavaScript supply chain. I work in web app world, so third-party JS dependencies just like we have the solutions, content security policy, sub-resource integrity, but they're hard to do. One of the solutions is to just self-host. Like if you look at most of my web apps, I just pull the third-party resources in now, because we used to pull all of these external dependencies because it's like, oh, CDN and bandwidth is expensive, and shared caching on the client, which is dead, and bandwidth is now free. So, pretty much free. Like for the most part now, I just self-host a lot of assets, but if you still want to have external dependencies, again, like CSP SRI, I talk about these things and people are like, oh, what's this? And I'm like, the solution is here now. It's just no one knows about it because we didn't tell anyone. So, we do have the ability to, like within my limited kind of, sliver of security, to solve the JavaScript supply chain problems.
Sweet.
But it's just getting the knowledge out there and making it accessible.
Yeah, native applications, we're kind of behind, and so we have we haven't gotten to some of the problems that are in JavaScript, but we have the problems we used to have. So a lot of companies that work in the native application space, they basically self-host, but they do that through the wonderful thing of never upgrading their dependencies.
I think everybody.
So you have supply chain, and then you have known vulnerabilities, and you can just kind of pick which one you would like. So it's an issue. You have to be on top of where you're getting the code that you're using, but you also have to be on top of the quality and the state of that, and that changes over time. Like something that had no known vulnerabilities last year for this specific version now suddenly has one, and how do you do that monitoring? And within native applications, that is still not a fully solved problem. there are a lot of people who are working on it.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer, but at least in the teams I worked in, we tried to make it more like in your face to the teams, that you have dependencies you need to upgrade or whatever. But then I also noticed that some teams take it seriously, while some teams just ignore the whole thing. So it's really hard. It's a tough one to solve.
There's an additional problem for anyone who's like shipping an actual physical product or like a thing that somebody will take and put in their house, or submarine or someplace.
Submarine?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've made stuff that goes into submarines. But how are you going to upgrade this thing? So yeah. Let's say that you were on top of everything, and now you shipped a version to this customer 4 years ago, and suddenly one of your dependencies has like a gaping hole in it, and it's built into this product which is in the submarine. So how are you going to do the upgrade? So that becomes a whole thing. It's not like a web server where you can just like roll up a new version. Suddenly you have to think about how you're going to do your deploy to existing customers, okay, so submarine, those people, you could probably call them and you could probably set something up. But if it's inside of a toy, inside of millions of kids' rooms, how are you going to do like your remote upgrade of all of the toys, right? So. Yeah.
IoT's disaster waiting to happen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like in about 3 years.
Cannot fire torpedo. Windows is updating.
Yes.
Or the update causes it, I guess.
All right. Are we safe now that we've integrated security into our CI/CD pipeline? Kind of a follow-up question.
No.
I would second that.
Well, a lot of people think that secure coding is a lot about automation, but I would say that it's not only automation, it's a lot more. So it doesn't really help just using automated CI/CD tools. There's a lot more around it.
And even if you have, security testing in CI/CD and a penetration test and, some other things, there's like, all of those tools only test for the things that we know about. Like Patricia said, tomorrow there could be a new vulnerability that no one previously knew about. So nothing is ever fully secure. It's just, have we met the bar of, basically like, I just want my house to be more secure than my neighbor's house, and then they'll go break in there and not me, right? Like, so all you actually need to do is be like 1% better than everybody else, and technically you're unhackable because they'll just leave you alone. So it's about just getting to a point where we're secure enough that we're not a good target and someone else is a good target instead.
So having the biggest bike lock, basically.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, oh, well, that one looks tough, so we'll take his. Like, thanks.
So we have an excellent question from the audience here. It's up there, right? How do you determine how much security is enough?
All of it.
Go on, sorry.
I think it goes a little bit to what Dylan said also. It's like, what are you protecting and how important is it? You don't have to have like, national security level things if it's just, the name of your kid's pet. So you have to kind of decide, and you have to scale it to that as well, and how much you can invest in it, because security is basically like a hole you could pour never-ending money into if you want to. So there is a cost benefit to it as well. So it's a difficult question to answer. I think like all questions in tech, the answer is it depends, right?
Yeah.
The phrase, like the official industry phrase, is threat modeling, right? Like you need to do the threat model and look at what are our, what realistic threats do we face? How much resource do they have, and how much resource do we need to spend? Because it all comes back to money in order to mitigate the threat. So, and like Patricia said, it depends on what it is, right? If I'm a bank, my budget is going to be larger and my threats are larger. And it helps sometimes to look at security as kind of like an insurance policy. It's like the thing that you really should have, but you never want to use. But you need to have it in case the bad thing happens and your time comes up. So you can spend minimal amounts on an insurance policy that will get you the minimum level of protection, or you can spend really big and get all the optional extras. And if you ever need it, hopefully it's going to provide better for you. So it's, yeah, like you have to do the threat model and decide based on your particular needs.
I totally agree with what you say. I also want to add that compliance actually comes in handy when it comes to security, like all of these regulations and laws and everything. I know a lot of projects where they wouldn't even do much security if they didn't have these laws and regulations. So we should be quite happy for having all of this. That's also, at least they have a baseline of what should be enough security.
So we could invest in people, we could buy a lot of tools, we could add all these processes and gain all this competency, or we could just buy cyber insurance.
It's like you're not wrong. Like that's the problem, right? I'm trying to figure out how to backpedal out of the question.
Yeah, unfortunately, we kind of see the result of that, right? The incentives are clearly not necessarily going in the direction we want to, but you have to see this as a on the industry as a whole. Like if right now we're seeing people hacking into insurance companies to figure out who is insured, because those people are the people you want to ransom because they will pay you. So then it's like. It's a difficult question to, as an industry, I don't think cyber insurance is doing us any favors. I think it's actually making ransomware to be a good business model. But there's a difference between seeing the industry as a whole and seeing it as an individual company. And for your company, that might make sense. So, yeah, I guess I ended up in it depends again, sorry.
But you're not wrong though, right? Like I hate the idea of it, but my company has it because it's required when we onboard new customers, and you know, in the 47-page Excel document when it says I don't use AOL Instant Messenger, I must also have like a $1 million cyber insurance policy. So, like I have cyber insurance. Like, you know, I'm in the hole and I can't dig out.
Let's do another question from the audience. What's the worst, funnest security fuck-up you encountered?
Ooh. I need a minute.
I had a funny one when I was at Opera. I think I can talk about it now because it was like 15 years ago, so nobody cares. And it was in Flash, and nobody uses Flash anymore, so it's fine. But I ended up having reported a bug where there was this game where I think that it was actually reported as a bug that if somebody used like the arrow keys in another window, that the character in the game moved, even though that the browser window didn't have focus. And this was reported as a bug, and you know, was escalated as a bug, and it arrived at my desk, and I go, oh yeah, we can write a keylogger in Flash. Which I then did, of course. And it took literally like I think it took like 6 months of bug fixing, because also it had an interaction between the browser and Flash, so I basically had to have like video conferencing meetings with people at Macromedia. But yeah, it was embarrassing on all parts. The only thing I can say, it wasn't only my fault, so it was a combined effort. But yeah. That was fun.
There's so many. I just, like my car that could be controlled remotely with an API token, and the API token was the chassis number, which is written in the window of every car. You know, like I once booked a holiday and saw the booking ID number, and I was like, that looks suspiciously like a really small integer, and I was like, I wonder what happens if I -1. It's like, hello, John Smith, with his passport details and when he's going to Barbados, and you know, like that was, there's just, it's so easy to make such a simple mistake that ends up really being bad. Like, there's just countless of them. You know, I took the one that kind of got me into the security industry because I used to do security, like research and hacking as a hobby for years and years and years, was I found a way to take remote control of a router provided by one of the biggest internet suppliers in the UK. And they have like 800,000 routers in people's homes. And I was like, you know, with a simple HTTP post, you can take like full control of the device by getting in as admin. And that just turned into like a massive news story, and it's, you know, they didn't fix it, and then we went live with we finally published it, and then they were like, oh, now we need to fix it. You know, it's like, it's a BBC headline. Now it's our P1. So there's loads. I've blogged about them all. Like, have a look. There's some bad ones.
I don't have any very funny ones. I think I'm still too young.
Yeah, it's not really that funny, but I guess I can tell it anyways. I was like randomly at the university, and a friend was like, "Hey, come over here. I need you to hack something for me." And it was like this simple.
And you were like, "Yeah, of course." No, that would be illegal.
Of course, yeah. So this was just like this tiny C wrapper that would send. I think it would send your code to through some other program that was running as professor privileges at the university. And of course, like when I said it's written in C, already there you can see it's probably going to be some bugs. And it was pretty good. Like, you could pass a file name, but no special characters were allowed, except that they were using like block listing instead of allow listing. So they had forgotten one character, which was the star. So when we sent in the star, I mean, it doesn't really give you anything, right? Like, you can't really make cool file names, but for some reason they had Python 3 binary in this directory. So the star would expand to Python 3, and we would get the Python 3 shell as the professor. Ooh. And I was like screaming, like, "Yeah!" And he was like, "No, we have to report it." So I didn't even get to, you know, create a file in his own directory. Yeah. So, you know, just a teeny tiny mistake, you forget one character, and boom, you have a professor shell, right?
So, funny security issues, and then we have this nefarious hackers all over the planet doing ransomware and all kinds of nasty stuff. Should we start hacking back, like attack forward?
Patricia's just quietly crying next to me. I just, like, it's such a minefield to walk into. This seems really big in America right now. I don't know if they're just like, you know, fuck yeah, shoot all the things in the cyberspace or something. So I feel like that's probably not the best approach. You know, it's like attribution though. You know, it's like, how do we even, you know, how can you be so sure with the attribution of where to shoot back that you're not shooting someone that's then going to hack back because you hacked them in the first place, and then we all just end up like hacking everyone. So I don't know, there's just something about that feels really like a bad idea for me, just because the attribution game is so unreliable. You know, I just, yeah, the idea worries me.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I agree on the attribution problem, and so if you don't know who it is, or if they just kind of yeah, like you saw with in Dylan's talk, where somebody sent an email that looked like it came from somebody else. You could do the same thing if you get into somebody's machine, like grandma's machine, and then you hack somebody from there. Like, okay, who are it is?
We're gonna hack grandma.
Yeah, sorry, it's just like you're gonna hack grandma back. It's just. It sounds like really cool and like TV, and yeah.
It'll definitely be on CSI Cyber.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think one of the like biggest problems with this is that we have a lot of known like threat actors, like government-backed attackers that are using compromised infrastructure to hack. And well, then let's say they compromise like a Norwegian company or something, and then they hack you, and then you hack them back, and suddenly, you know, oops, I've hacked a, you know, legit company. It's I think it's definitely a minefield, and I guess it's illegal as well, isn't it? Or
yeah.
I guess if you hack like a real C2, they won't like sue you back, but I don't know.
So related to that, another question from the audience. Is there a particularly interesting, impressive, sophisticated attack or exploit you have encountered? You don't get to say your car again.
No, I mean, like that falls short of the impressive and sophisticated part, anyway. Oh, what have you got?
The MechWarrior 3 hack for rooting the original Xbox.
Was that the save file game?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, go on.
Somebody worked out that if you used a certain file name when you were saving games in MechWarrior 3, there was a buffer overrun which would allow you to patch the firmware on the original Xbox and install your own operating system through the Linux movies and stuff. Because
Yep.
at that point, someone actually had to take the chip out, put it in the chip. I have no idea how. Like, did someone go, right, I'm going to try every file name I can think of on every game, starting with A, and then A Odyssey, and eventually they got to MechWarrior, and they're like, I got a good feeling about this. I have no idea. But yeah, you save the game with a particular file name.
I guess it's just the development lab that did that.
Yeah. Right? Someone must have done something. Yeah. But yeah, it's
Insider job.
runtime protection, and somebody figured out that save games in MechWarrior would exploit that vulnerability, and then you could root your Xbox, you could remove the DRM and all that kind of stuff. And that blew my mind when I found, like, how did you find it? They'd be like, yeah, I need a copy of MechWarrior 3 in about 10 minutes. Boom, bang, there you go, done. You can play pirated games. Brilliant.
Dylan knows a lot about doing illegal things. Right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I read about it.
Yeah. Just fell into that one. There's like in about a year, I'll publish a blog post of the most sophisticated and interesting and awesome thing that I've ever seen. I'm currently working I work as an expert witness in the courts in the UK on cybersecurity, like criminal cases. And in about a year, I'll be able to talk about literally the most sophisticated, awesome thing I've ever worked on and seen. So check back in a year.
You know,
Subscribe. There we go. Like I could have totally sold that better, couldn't I?
I think a lot of the game console hacking stuff is really cool. Like what they did with Nintendo Switch, for example, where they found a buffer overflow in the NVIDIA whatever boot ROM, and they were able to compromise the console, and it's a little bit hard to patch because it's in the ROM, so they had to do some crazy hack to ish patch the systems. And just the way they're recovering encryption keys and stuff. I mean, I don't really understand it, but they do some hardware trickery, and then boom, there's the key. It's yeah, it's really, really cool.
Cool. Is password guessing really hacking?
I mean, it depends on the context. If I have the hash locally, then no. But if I'm trying to log in against, no, yeah, I guess I'm going to go with no. I don't think so. But it depends if you're guessing against a local hash that I have, then no. If I'm trying to log into the service and just randomly trying to guess your password, then under the CMA, the Computer Misuse Act in the UK, then that's attempting to gain authorized access, so yes. But if I'm guessing a hash locally, then, we'll not talk about how I obtain the hash, but I'm guessing the hash locally, then I think that's okay. Patricia's I'm not going to incriminate myself on this one.
Let's see. Yeah, more of a question for anyone, not just developers. Is VPN necessary for ordinary private persons?
Depends on what you define as an ordinary private person. So I think I've been speaking a lot to sex workers, and that is a very interesting threat model, because they have a totally different threat model than normal people, or normal people. They are also normal people, but people who are not sex workers, and their threat model is more similar to maybe people who have abusive spouses that they are hiding from. So they are very very intent on hiding their real life identities and their real life locations. And so I think a lot of cases that we're people who don't have those kinds of threat models wouldn't need VPNs for anything, then I think for certain people who are have private identities and locations they need to hide, then things like VPNs might make sense. On the other hand, I don't know how many VPNs can actually be trusted. so this is like a massive scam world, and a lot of them are absolutely not trustworthy in any way, and you should definitely not use them. And knowing which ones are usable and which are not is not something a layperson could do. So yeah, it's a hard question.
It depends, right?
Yeah, it depends. I'm just going to give up. That's my answer to everything. It depends, yeah.
But like you're right though, and a lot of the time when people ask me questions like this, I can only answer with what I do, because I do the thing that I think is the most correct, and the answer is the vast majority of the time I don't use one. So, and I do, I want to be private online and don't want people to see what I do, and I log into secure services and I use public Wi-Fi like all for the last 2 days whilst I've been training, and I've not once used a VPN. So I think with the explosion of encryption online in the last few years, most of the traditional privacy concerns have gone, because the vast majority of websites now use proper encryption, and that neutralizes most of the typical kind of privacy threats of using a public Wi-Fi network or something else. So there are valid use cases for sure, but I think a typical person in a typical day probably does not fall into the requirement of needing a VPN anymore.
I think especially the trusting the provider part is probably the most important, because okay, you can probably hide some of your traffic from the local network or your ISP or whatever, but you're still putting, your trust in the provider, and they can see at least the IPs you're connecting to and stuff. So
yeah. So it really comes down to who are you afraid of here? If the people you're afraid of are not the government or the police, but the people you're afraid of are private citizens, then you're probably okay. But if the moment you're saying that the people you're afraid of are the government or criminals or things like that, it's a little bit harder to say that a VPN is going to help you. This might be just an open box for them. So it comes down to who are you afraid of, really. And I think for most people, I don't use a VPN. I don't think that you need one today. Thanks to a lot of the work that Scott has done, we have HTTPS everywhere, and so yeah. No, sorry, I'm just gonna
go
stop
say
saying.
You almost said it.
Depends.
No, it's okay.
It depends. It depends.
Another question from the audience here. What do you think is the best way to make company leaders understand they have to put more money into security compared to development?
I told you so about 5 minutes after you get hacked. That's usually the fastest way that I get budget for a project, is shit, we got hacked. But I'll think about a serious answer now.
I usually say that don't call it security, call it something else. Call it stability and robustness and high uptime, and brand it as something else. But it's extremely hard to sell, because how you're going to do that is if you went to a customer and you go so you should give me $1 million, and they're like, why? So I can make this product that you're using that I sold you more secure. And they're going what are you saying? This thing isn't secure? It's it's an impossible thing to sell, and the same problem is internally. How are you going to sell it internally to management? It's we have to spend all this money to become secure. What are you saying, that what you made me is crap? It's the value proposition is terrible as a selling point. So selling it as something else, like robustness, uptime, whatever, quality metric is easier in my experience.
I also often call it quality instead.
Yeah.
But as a consultant in a consultancy company, just having training for the project managers and everyone who has a little more to say out in the projects, that's something that I find really important. If they have the knowledge, it's easier to
Persuade.
Persuade, yeah. The leaders, yeah.
I think like you've kind of like twigged a thought there for a more serious answer, and you kind of hit the point of not selling it as security. So when I do consultancy around crypto, like encryption, not Bitcoin, because I have to clarify that now. You know, upgrading to the latest version of TLS, right? People are on TLS 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, and I'm like, yeah, come get TLS 1.3. It's the most secure version of the protocol, and they just like nod off in their chair. But it's like, hey, TLS 1.3 is like X% faster because we have one less round trip on the handshake, and you know, ECDSA authentication is faster than RSA, and the page will load quicker. And then I compare, like the comparison that I made the last time I talked about this was, it's kind of like Tesla selling sustainable cars, right? It's about sustainable transport, it's about green transport, and yet you never hear them mention green or sustainable in their advertising or marketing, right? It's like, ooh, look at this thing, it's cool and fast, and everyone's like, I'll buy that. And it's like, ha ha ha, we made you buy a green car without talking about it. And it, like, we need to be more like that. You're absolutely right. Like, you know, do like a bait and switch with something cool, but actually not, you know, just sneak the security in with the cool thing.
Yes, I guess there was I guess we'd call it a conspiracy for some time that Apple would release like new emojis every time they had an important.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. It's like, there are new emojis in this update, and like 12 critical vulnerabilities were patched. But hey, smiley dog, like, it works. Like, I'm serious, it works.
Okay, this is an interesting one from the audience. Let's get some unpopular opinions. What is your hill to die on?
What hill do I die on? There are so many hills.
Usability, security, vulnerabilities that are actually usability fails. So for example, we talked about IoT. One of the things is like we've had a long time is that people will have like default passwords for the device, and nobody changes them, because when would you do that? Like like normal people, they will like somebody installed their security system, and then there's a camera in the corner mining Bitcoin because it's like and that is a usability fail. We missed the opportunity to make someone choose a different password, and how are they going to remember it? Like if you talk to users and they go like, you had this opportunity to change the password, and they're like, yeah, but I'm never going to remember that password. Now I can Google it, you know. It's like so yeah, I think we have issues like that it comes down to that the usability of security is terrible in many cases, and that makes people do unsafe choices because those choices are easier. Yeah. So I guess it's an unpopular hill to die on because it's not really cool.
No, I mean, like mine is basically in complete agreement. It's never the user's fault. Like, it's my hill to die on, right? Like it's so easy to blame the user for things. Like we mentioned, don't click a link earlier, and I made the joke of like, oh yes, the multifunctional device that does what else? Like the only thing you do with a link is click on the link, right? Like there's nothing else to do with it. If I don't click on that, why did we invent it? Like, they don't have another purpose. And yeah, I had a consultancy gig going back months and months now, and you know, it was like, oh well, like this was clearly, obviously, like a bad link, and the user just should not have clicked on this. And I'm like, well, if it's so clearly and obviously bad, why don't you just write a rule to filter it out? Oh well, we can't do that. It's like, right, so like, oh, well, it's not that obvious then, is it? Because if you can't write a piece of code that filters it out, then it wasn't that obvious. So it's just easy. It's the easy way out, is to just place the burden on the user. And I hate working on anything where, you know, if the answer and the solution involves the words the user should or the user must, it's just like, toss it out the window, let's sit down and figure out how to do this properly, because it's never going to work. And it's not to criticize the user, to say that they are unreliable. Like, we know the user's unreliable, and we keep depending on them and then being surprised when they fail. And it's like, was it Albert Einstein that said, like, keep doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome is the definition of insanity? It's like, hi, welcome to my job. Security.
Want to add anything? No? All right. I think it's time for the last and most important question of all. What is the best hacker movie of all times?
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
I'll allow
War
it to you.
games, war games. Okay,
That
I'm
is
gonna.
a
I'm
good
just
one.
old school here. It's like
No,
war
that's
games.
good.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if I can beat that now. I mean, I'm kind of like half torn between hackers and the Matrix.
Oh.
Like I think I'm slightly more leaning on the Matrix. I think I'll go with the Matrix.
Matrix. Okay.
I'll go with hackers then.
Like the planet. Yeah.
Do I have to choose another movie now? Or
You can choose one of the.
So you're the deciding vote now.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say the same thing as Patricia. Like I'm old school,
Yeah.
and then go with hackers.
Not old enough.
All right, I think that's what we have time for today. So thank you so much for answering the questions, and give them a hand. And it's a wrap.